Hello and welcome to a slightly different video from my usual subject matter. Today I would like to delve into a horror that is ever so slightly different. A horror that, to me, is inescapable. Ever since I was younger, horror has always intrigued me. I may not have even realised my interest with horror, but what with the likes of Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, both airing whilst I was growing up, I was always watching. But everyone at that age watched Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, and we all discussed each and every episode we watched during lunchtime in school the next day. But as I got older, the idea of fear, the unknown, and the horror aspects always lingered within me. Discovering more quote-unquote adult horror, like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, amped up the intrigue, but it fell slightly to the wayside once I was within my later teenage years, until a certain manga strip was brought to my attention. My good friend Brian gave me a quick summary about a manga that he found online. He said that it might be of interest to myself, so Brian sent me the link, and once I clicked, I knew that there was no going back. I was greeted by a cover image of a young man situated in the foreground wearing a shirt with Harvest embroidered across his chest, with the woman standing idle in an odd position behind him but even further back. Within the background was an open cliff face with what looked like silhouettes of people within the cliff face. At first I didn't think much of it. It didn't jump out at me like any type of horror strip would, so it didn't strike me as typically scary. But as I studied the image further and further, a sense of dread and slight fear started to overcome me. I could delve further into this story of the enigma of Imgur Fault, but I'm sure that many of you watching would know exactly how it goes with the subject matter of this video, perhaps for another time. The enigma of Imgur Fault stayed in my mind, even hours after reading. It never leaves. For years, I was always intrigued in its story and to see if the artist had done any other projects, as I had knew nothing about them. After some time, a video popped up in my recommendations on YouTube called How Media Scares Us by the ever so talented SuperEyePatchWolf. In iPatchWolf's video, he delves into the work of an artist known as Junji Ito, whose work spans nearly 3 decades within the horror genre. And as he delves further into Junji's work, I get this sense of familiarity, a sense of that I've seen this before, and it hits me. This is the artist who created Imgur Fault, and sure enough, it is brought up within his video. I was glued to my screen on how Ito's work is used in media, and once I finished watching the video, I was hungry for more. I needed to search deeper into Ito's work and research his stories. Since I viewed SuperEyePatchWolf's video, I'd gotten married, and with that brought a lot of hard work and determination to make the big day happen. So I never went forward with my research into his work, as it had left my mind. Shortly after my wedding, my wife and I went on our honeymoon to the beautiful city of Copenhagen in Denmark. We visited several areas, towns and museums, but I had to see what the comic book and card game scene was like within the capital of Denmark. After several days, I googled just about any local comic book or card shop, something like that would be near us. I found one that was just perfect. A place called Farsighted. We began our walk, and after several minutes of following Google Maps and bumbling down a wrong turn, we caught the yellow and black for Farsighted in our vision. It was a quaint, below street level shop with many action figures, lunchboxes, t-shirts, and other geek-like memorabilia, where we purchased some presents for our friends. But not once did I come across what I intended to search for. I was interested to see what the card game scene was like here in Denmark, but never found any in the shop. To my disappointment, we left, but I felt like that just wasn't everything to see. I saw pictures online of this huge store, but where we went just didn't corroborate with the pictures, until we kept on walking and then came to the end of the street, where across the road from where we were, to our surprise, stood yet another Farsighted. And it hit me. There were several different shops with the same branding for different aspects of nerd and geek-like culture. There was a memorabilia shop, a card, board and tabletop shop, a kids-friendly version, a comic book version, and even a cosplay shop. We entered into the comic book store as it had many comics, including some manga, and it just popped into my head. They just might have some Junji Ito within this store. So I asked the polite shop teller if they had any Junji Ito, and sure enough, right near where I was a decent collection of his work. I was elated with the collection I was witnessing right before my very eyes. I couldn't think of what one to purchase, as I realised that I could read online several more of his work, but I much preferred to have the physical copy in my grasp and support the artist in some form. I quickly flicked through Uzumaki, Gyo, and Tomy. I knew that these were some of his most recognised work, but there was one little book that just stood out to me. A brightly coloured little hardback titled Shiver, Junji Ito Selected Stories, which is a fantastic little book with short stories hand-picked by the man himself. And I thought to myself, this is perfect to draw myself into the world of his work, and I can look to purchase more in the future. I happily brought the newest addition to my collection to the counter, purchased it, and my wife and I were on our way to continue our honeymoon in the beautiful city of Copenhagen. Once the evening was drawing to a close, we returned to our hotel and threw on the TV to unwind, relax, and regale with how the day went. After our chats and my journey to grab some treats from the corner shop, I returned and took notice of the Pharos bag on the floor propped up against the couch. Its bright yellow colouring offending my vision, with their mascot proudly emblazoned in the front in a way signalling for me to come over. I grabbed the bag and took out the new book I bought, and just felt compelled to dive right in. I sat in the bed, opened up the book, and once I did, I was adrift in Ito's world. As I flipped to his first story, I was greeted with its title, Used Record. This story was not at all inherently shocking or frightening to myself, but as it progressed, it became a fantastic opening to this collection. It builds on slow tension and fear which accompanies Ito's work further into this collection, but with Used Record, it was the one at the very beginning. It left a good opener in my mind on how this book could go, but this was entirely flipped upside down with what came next. Each and every story had its impact and horrifying effect on me. The horrific holes implanted all over Hideo's body in the collection's title, Shiver. The fear of Fuchi from Fashion Model. But throughout all of these stories, none has affected me more than one very specific story. After I'd finished the entire collection, I read the last page, closed the book, and sat back to take in what I just read. That one story just forever kept jumping at me. Hanging Blimp. There was just something about it that I just couldn't shake. I'm a sucker for movies and stories where humanity is wiped out and there are only a handful of survivors, or maybe only even one survivor. Similar enough to the Twilight Zone story, Time Enough at Last. Time Enough at Last tells the story of far-sighted bank teller and avid bookworm Henry Bemis, who, whilst reading David Copperfield, shortchanges an annoyed customer, gets nagged at by his boss and his wife for reading Doggerel. His wife commits a cruel joke upon him by asking him to read poetry aloud, which he happily obliges, only to find that she has inked over the text on every page and destroys the book in front of him. As Henry takes his lunch break in the bank's vault, he sees a newspaper which reads, H-bomb capable of total destruction, and hears an enormous explosion outside the bank, violently shaking the bank and knocking Bemis unconscious. He regains consciousness and discovers that with the bank demolished, everyone is dead, and discovers that the entire city has been destroyed, and finding himself totally alone in a shattered world with canned food to last him a lifetime, but no one to share with. He succumbs to despair and tries to commit suicide, but sees the library in the distance. He finds that the books are still intact and legible, and realises that he has all the time in the world without interruption, and as he bends down to pick up his first book, he stumbles. His glasses fall off, shatter, and he utters the iconic line, "It's not fair. It's not fair," whilst bursting into tears, surrounded by the books that he can never read. That was indeed a long exposition to speak about a short Twilight Zone episode, but it reaffirms the point I tried to make earlier. I love the horror story of being alone, isolated, and the idea of helplessness. It is such a terrifying horror that Ito brings time and time again with his work, which is inescapable horror. Ito begins his story at the end, enticing the reader with the idea of this unknown entity harassing our protagonist, Kazuko, grabbing our interest to see what happens from the get-go, and launching us into this incredible story. I won't go into too much depth about Hanging Blimp here, as I would like to create another video discussing it in much further detail. But the fear I had whilst reading this story was just what SuperEyePatchWolf had stated, the fear of being unable to escape what is currently unfolding in front of you. I felt this exactly with Kazuko, when her and her friends see 4 large objects floating towards them, which were in fact their very own heads. My heart was racing the entire time, and I felt incredible fear with the image of my own head floating towards me. And this is the kind of horror and fear that works exactly for myself, that encapsulates me perfectly within this world. The one that never leaves me, but also leaves a huge impact. The sheer horror on Kazuko's face when her friend has her head deflated like her larger version thanks to the man with the crossbow still gives me shivers thinking about it, and anytime I reread the story I just can't take my eyes away from it. Now that I've read a number of Ito's stories, I discovered that he always has this sense of hope and triumph for whose story we are witnessing unfold. There's always this last sliver of hope and happiness, which in turn will bring a delightful ending that we can all be happy with, but he always plucks it away at the very last moment, leaving an emptiness situated within. There are no happy endings here. This is why his work hasn't left my mind since last August. Nearly every day since reading Shiver, I have thought about each and every story at least once. My mind always flows back to his imagery and feeling of helplessness and despair. I've researched Ito himself and read so much more of his work, but I am not yet finished. I recently read his story, She is a Slow Walker, about a horror-obsessed couple whom are having an argument about Romero's slow zombies being better than the fast zombies and vice versa, where Shinichi's girlfriend, Yumi, becomes a slow-walking zombie in their apartment after she argued to him that slow walkers are better, and after his food reserves run dry, he just gives up and lets her eat him, but he becomes so hungry that he gives in to temptation and starts eating her innards. I was eating breakfast the night after reading this, and had a hard time finishing it, as I just couldn't get the image of Shinichi eating Yumi's intestines out of my mind, and I'm sure that it won't go away anytime soon. Anytime that image is cropped up here now for the making of this video, always leaves this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. My aim now is to collect as many of Ito's works as I possibly can and experience them firsthand, right in the very palm of my hands. To dive into each and every world that he's created with excitement, wonder, and fear. Ever since last August, I've become obsessed with reading more and more, whilst also catching some very interesting videos about his work and horror within the manga genre in general. And it is at this point of the video where I leave you all and try to escape this nightmare. But we all know that there is no escape from the nightmares from the mind of Junji Ito. Thank you one and all for coming along with me on this little video about the fantastic Junji Ito. I hope that you enjoyed my little fan out of him, and also check out YouTube creators whom I've mentioned, such as SuperEyePatchWolf and also Ryan Hollinger, who helped me shape this content that I would like to create here on YouTube and give me the courage and purpose to just go ahead and make videos that I would like. It would make me happy, and if anyone else out there also enjoys these videos, then I am forever grateful. Thank you once again. I'll see you in the next song.